Higher education and lifelong learning are about to go through a revolution. They need to go through a revolution. At the turn of the 19th to 20th centuries, countries around the world were going through the Industrial Revolution, the first and the second one. And in response, I argue that the most important thing that societies did was create universal K-12 education. It laid the foundations for all of the growth and success of the 20th century. By making everybody literate and numerate, they could engage in the jobs and the economy and as citizens in the growing democracies and economies of the 20th century. In response to the third and fourth industrial revolution at the start of the 21st century, we need a similar scale rethink and revolution related to lifelong learning and higher education, because it's no longer enough to get a degree in your early 20s and expect that knowledge to carry you through life. One of the ways in which higher education and lifelong learning need to shift is by changing the conversation from being just about the skills agenda and the skills gaps in the technology areas or in the soft skills to a conversation about mindsets. One of the most important changes that needs to happen in the way we think about higher education and lifelong learning is to not think about it as two different steps. It needs to be a process that starts when you leave grade 12 education and go into the workforce and education simultaneously. We need a shift in mindsets, not just in skills and not just in knowledge, that learning is something you do in university and on the job, and you continue to have that relationship between real world problems and the classroom evolving throughout career and life. There's a responsibility for corporations, there's a responsibility for universities and for government and policy to create the environment for these discussions. We all know that Gen Z wants to not just work and make money, but also change the world for the better. Of course, we don't necessarily train that in our engineering degrees or our business degrees as the foundation, and that's part of the rethink. There's examples of places like the 42 School, which teaches individuals ranging from 18 all the way into their 60s how to code. It's all experiential learning that they do together and connect to real-world stakeholders who need that type of skill. So if you're in the private sector, government, or universities and higher education, and you're trying to figure out how do we address the skills gap that we continue to talk about, there's two main suggestions I would have. The first I've already mentioned is mindsets, is about talking to students or professionals going through training, not only about the content that they're learning, but the process of learning and how they need to embrace and engage that.
You don't know what the word study means. You haven't the slightest idea.
The second big suggestion that I would have is we need to break down the barriers between higher education and the training programs that we have and the workforce. That involves, if you're in the corporate sector, looking at the skills training, the development pathways that you have, identifying the mindsets that you need, but then also not assuming you have to design and deliver that all yourself. You need to be looking at higher education institutions, social enterprises, and asking how can we be bringing those sorts of practices and the expertise there into the room with our employees as they're grappling with real-world challenges. If you're in higher education or any sort of lifelong learning or social enterprise focused on education, we need to be working with the private sector and NGOs, and governments for that matter, to ensure that we're bringing real, live, wicked challenge cases into the classroom that help the students recognize that it's not just about the knowledge and skills that you're gaining in a particular area, but about how you deploy them and the challenges of deploying them in those real-world wicked environments. That's what builds true lifelong skill, true deeper education throughout life in order to be able to tackle the wicked challenges that we all know we're facing in society today.